It was a cold winter night, and Allison sat attentively on the edge of the bed, listening to her parents as they fussed over her, telling her all the golden rules for her first college party. She was 21 and had already heard all the rules before. Watch out for strange cars, don't interact with strange guys, don't accept drinks from random guys or leave your drink unattended, don't go into a room alone with a guy, drink responsibly, don't drive drunk, and don't walk home by yourself, get a friend to walk with you, carry pepper spray and a taser because it's not safe for a young woman to walk alone at night. She exclaimed, Dad, Jake is outside waiting on me. They both looked bothered and said, Allison, please be careful and keep your phone on. She yelled, I will, and ran out of the house to Jake's car. She slid into the passenger seat, kissed him on the lips, and said, I'm so sorry, my parents were freaking out. He smiled and said, that's okay. He slowly drove to the Omega Nu party. They sat, laughing and chatting casually. When they finally arrived, Allison tried to open the passenger door, but Jake giggled and said, Hey, don't worry, I got you. In that moment, Allison's heart skipped a beat and she smiled, kissing him again. Jake opened the driver's door, walked around to the passenger side, and Allison sat in the front seat, admiring him. His handsome face, lighter hazel eyes, dimples, and dirty blonde hair falling across his forehead made him physically perfect. But that wasn't the most interesting thing about Jake, not by far. Maybe it was the twinkle in his eyes when he looked at her or how his dimples only showed when he smiled at her, but the most wonderful thing about Jake was his commitment to God. It made Allison love him even more. A small giggle brought Allison out of her trance. She hadn't even realized that Jake had already opened her door. She turned to him, blushed, and he helped her out of the car. They held hands as they walked into the loud house filled with drunk college students dancing to loud music. Jake led them to a couch where they sat down. Would you like a soda? He asked. She smiled and said yes. Stay right here, Jake said. I'm going to grab us some sodas. Allison watched as Jake disappeared into the crowd. When she heard a snippy voice behind her, she turned to see Jennifer standing there, smirking. Look who decided to show up to the party. Isn't it Miss Little Perfect and her Ken doll boyfriend? Allison rolled her eyes and put on a smile. Oh, hi Jennifer, how's it going? Jennifer smugly replied, how's it going? I don't know. It's a party, not my first time, unlike you. Isn't this scene a little too sinful for you and your boyfriend? Before Allison could respond, Jake's voice called out, Allison, babe, look who I found. She looked up and saw her study buddy, Hazel, standing behind Jake, smiling from ear to ear. Hey, girl. What are you doing? Hazel asked. Then Hazel stopped mid-step, threw Jennifer a look of disgust, and said, Hey, Jen, why don't you hop on your broom and fly away? Jennifer smirked and said, Sure, as soon as you stop third-wheeling. She laughed, then walked past Hazel, making sure to bump into her. Hazel gasped and said, Excuse you. But Jennifer just ignored her and disappeared into the crowd. Allison grabbed Hazel's hand and said, Ignore her. Lord knows it won't do any good. It's just best to leave that in God's hands. Hazel smiled and said, You're right. She then sat down next to Allison, and the three of them chatted until Jake and Allison's song came on. Jake pulled Allison to the dance floor. Hazel watched and applauded them. But midway through the dance, Allison felt a hard push and tumbled forward. A strong arm caught her. She looked up and saw Jake, concerned. She steadied herself and turned around to find Jennifer standing behind her. Maybe you should watch where you're going, Jennifer sneered. Allison replied, I'm dancing, and you walked into me. Jennifer smirked. Maybe if you were watching where you were backing that huge load of yours, you would have seen me coming. Allison opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, something cold splashed across her face. Oh my gosh, Jen, how could you throw your drink on her? She heard a deep voice say. Jennifer spoke up, Don't be a drama king, Jake. It's just a little whiskey. Allison panicked, the smell of booze on her clothes. She needed to clean up soon. She grabbed Jake's hand and said, "Come on, babe, let's go. I need to clean up." Jake agreed, saying he had a change of clothes at his apartment that Allison could borrow. They turned and headed for the door, but as they walked away, Jennifer kept taunting them. "I hope you don't get caught sinning by going to his apartment. Anything can happen." 10 a.m. The phone rang in the Tanning house. "Hello, this is Meredith." "Mrs. Tanning, this is Jake. I was wondering if you've seen Allison today. She didn't show up to class, and I'm a bit worried." "Oh, I'm sorry, Jake. I thought she was with you." "She was, but she mentioned grabbing a book from the library before going to class and meeting up with me in class. But she never showed up." "Are you sure about this, Jake?" "Yes, ma'am, she didn't show up. This isn't like her. I just wanted to see if she was home. Maybe she got sick or something." Meredith, a little shocked and suspicious, said, "That's not like Allison. She normally tells you everything. I'll go check her room, just to be safe." Meredith walked upstairs, still on the phone, asking if Jake had asked her friends. He confirmed he had, but no one had seen her. Meredith finally reached Allison's room. She held her breath as she twisted the doorknob and opened it to find Allison's bed still made, untouched. Her heart sank. This wasn't like her daughter to disappear. She told Jake she needed to know everything. Jake stuttered, acting strange and repeating his story. Meredith pressed him, asking, "Are you sure that's all?" Jake stuttered, "Yes." Meredith began to freak out. Just then, her husband, Kiss, came out of the bedroom. "What's going on?" he asked. "Hyperventilating," Meredith said. "Allison hasn't come home, and she didn't show up for class today." She explained everything Jake had told her. Kiss grabbed the phone and spoke with Jake. Meredith leaned against the wall, praying and asking God for everything to be okay. When she heard Kiss say, "We need to go to the police station and report this now," she looked at him and said, "We can't report her missing until it's officially been 24 hours. Kiss, frustrated, said, "What are we supposed to do in the meantime?" Meredith grabbed his hands and said, "We pray and wait. Hopefully, she'll come walking through the door." They made calls asking if anyone had seen Allison, but no one had. As the time passed, they grew anxious. Kiss said, "This is insane, Meredith. How are we standing here doing nothing? We have to do something." "What do you suggest we do, Kiss?" she asked. "Anything but this," he said. He grabbed his car keys. "We're going to check around campus." Meredith agreed. They went all over campus looking for Allison, but it was a dead end. So they went home to regroup and pray. The next morning, they rushed to the police station. They spoke quickly at the front desk. Hey, calm down. My name is Sergeant K. How can I help you today?" Kiss breathed in and said, "Our daughter has been missing for 24 hours, and we'd like to file a missing person report." The police took Allison's information and said they would call them when they had any news of her whereabouts. For the next 3 days, they anxiously prayed and waited. Then, they heard a loud knock on the door. Kiss went to open it as Meredith sat nervously on the couch. Sergeant K greeted them. Meredith jumped up. "Have you found Allison? Have you found my baby?" Sergeant K hung his head. "Unfortunately, we found her, but I regret to inform you." Meredith screamed, "No! No! No, Allison!" Her husband held her tightly as she collapsed. Sergeant K finished, "This morning, we found Allison's body near Highway 10. We need you to come down to the coroner's office to confirm it's her." Kiss looked at Sergeant K. "Okay, we'll follow you." They stood in the cold, uncomfortable place, staring at the lifeless body of what used to be their vibrant, beautiful daughter. She was gone, and there was nothing they could do to bring her back. They stood in silence, comforting each other. The next morning, they both woke up and prayed that God would protect their daughter's soul and bring them peace. The following 6 months were dry and painful. They had to bury their daughter. The person responsible for her death had not been found, and the police were no closer to finding any evidence. We can't just sit here anymore. We have to find justice for her, and we have to do it now, Cus. I couldn't agree more. I'll go get the keys, and we'll go talk to Jake. I don't think that's a good idea, Cus. Why not? He was the last one to see her, Meredith. I don't know, but something in my heart is telling me we shouldn't trust him. Ever since he called me about Allison being missing, he's been acting strange and guilty. I just don't trust him. We need to check his story first. Okay, what do you suggest we do first? Well, he told me and the police that Allison told him she was going to the library that day. But, honey, we know she didn't go to the library that day. The cameras and the staff proved that. Well, what if Jake's lying and covering himself so no one suspects him? That does make sense. He was the last person she was with that night, and like you said, he has been acting strange. I know. I think we need to go talk to his neighbors and see what they saw or heard. Okay, let's go. Cus grabbed the keys, opened the door for his wife, and they silently drove to Jake's apartment complex. They parked the car on the opposite side of where Jake lived and took the back alley to his building. They went to his neighbor's door, and Cus knocked as Meredith stood behind him. They asked the man if they could ask him some questions. He agreed, apologized for their loss, and invited them in. They all sat, and Cus led the conversation, asking if the man had seen or heard anything. He looked nervous and said, I don't like to pry, but the night Allison went missing, I heard yelling and screaming coming from the apartment. Then I saw Allison storm out of the house 20 minutes later with Jake following behind her. He looked pretty upset, but I didn't think he would do something that cruel. They thanked the man for his help and walked to the car. As they were walking, the rage inside Cus began to boil over. He jumped in the car after helping his wife in and drove to the front. That's when he saw Jake exiting his parked car, accompanied by a dark-haired girl. This fueled Cus's anger even more. He stopped the car, slammed it into park, and walked quickly toward Jake. Jake turned around and said, Mr. Tanning. Before he could finish his sentence, Cus punched him, causing him to stumble to the ground. Cus stepped over him, grabbed him by the shoulder, and hit him 2 more times before his wife pulled him off, telling him to stop. As she pulled him away, 2 police cars pulled in, stopping in front of Jake's car, blocking it in. Sergeant K emerged from one of the cars, asking what was going on and examining the scene. No one spoke, so he told his officers to cuff both of them and put Cus in his car. Back at the station, Sergeant K told Cus how stupid it was for him to do that. Cus said, he did something to my daughter. He was the last person to see her, and he lied. Sergeant K responded, we know someone saw Jake at the gas station 2 miles away from where Allison was dumped. I want answers, and we're going to get them together. What do you mean? Cus asked. Jake says he'll tell everything that happened as long as he gets to look you in the eyes and tell you the truth. It's the least he owes you, Sergeant K said. We're going to bring him in, Cus. You need to control yourself so we can get the truth. Can you do that? Cus nodded. Sergeant K stood, stepped out of the room, and then the door opened again as Sergeant K escorted Jake inside. He handcuffed him to the table and told him to speak. Jake addressed Cus, saying, Mr. Tanning, I'm sorry I lied. I just thought about how bad it would look if people knew the truth. Cus growled, which is? Well, we went to the party as planned, but this girl, Jennifer, threw booze all over Allison. She wanted to leave to change her clothes, and I told her I had a change of clothes at my apartment. We left the party and went back to my place. I got the clothes for Allison, and when I came back out of the room to give them to her, she was holding up a pair of panties, asking me who they belonged to. You were cheating on her? Cus snapped. No, I loved Allison. I would never cheat on her. To be honest, I don't know whose panties those were, Jake said. Kiss sarcastically said, maybe it was the girl you were with. Jake responded, no, it's not what you think. Of course, nothing is what we think. Why don't you enlighten us? Kiss said. Jake spoke again, I swear I don't know whose panties they were, but Allison didn't believe some girl's panties just magically appeared in my apartment. She didn't believe me when I said I wasn't cheating on her. I tried to explain, but she slapped me and ran out of the apartment. I ran after her, trying to convince her to come back and hear me out, but when I rounded the corner of my apartment, she wasn't there. I ran to my car and drove around looking for her. I was near an empty tank, so I went to a gas station to get some gas and some energy drinks and drove around my neighborhood, the university, and your neighborhood, checking to see if I could find her. But there was no sign of her, so I thought maybe she crashed at a friend's house. And she would show up for class, but she never did. So I panicked and called your wife. After we hung up, I kept searching, but no one saw her or heard from her. Then, about 2 days ago, Jennifer kept stalking me, saying she had information on what happened to Allison. I was hesitant at first because I didn't trust Jennifer and thought she might have something to do with Allison's death. She said she didn't, and she had to speak to me quickly and somewhere private, so I picked her up and brought her to my apartment. That was the girl in my car, Jake finished. Sergeant K asked, what was she supposed to tell you? Jake said, I don't know, but she said it was about Allison's death. If only I could have convinced her to stay, maybe I didn't look hard enough, I should have kept searching for her, but I failed her, I was supposed to protect her. Jake said, bursting into a sobbing mess. Sergeant K stood and said, sorry, gentlemen, but I'm going to have to put you two in cells while I reach out and find this Jennifer character. He turned to Jake and gently asked, do you have an address for Jennifer? Jake shook his head, tears flowing down his cheeks. No, she was mysterious and wanted to keep things low profile. Sergeant K asked, what about a last name? Jake answered, yes, it's Tremble. Jennifer Tremble. Sergeant K turned to the officers and asked them to escort both men to their cells while he got an address for Jennifer. Sergeant K stepped out of the cruiser and walked up to Jennifer's door. When he arrived, the door was already cracked open. He immediately drew his weapon, called for backup, and alerted them that he was checking the premises. As he entered, it was silent, and there was no sign of anyone. He checked the kitchen, the bathroom, and then walked down the hall to the bedroom. He opened the door and found a bloody mess. A man was lying face down on the ground. Sergeant K checked his pulse and found there was none. He then went to the bed and checked the woman, who was lying on the side of the bed, just like the man. The woman, too, was face down, execution style, both with a bullet in the back of their heads. Sergeant K called for a crime lab and the coroner. Back at the station, Sergeant K sat, puzzled, wondering how the one person who had information about Allison's death ended up dead. He was interrupted by an officer who told him that the sisters of Travis Hunt were here. He sighed heavily and walked over to them, dreading every second. Once again, he was about to shatter another family's dream, their loved one wasn't coming home tonight. Hello, ladies, I'm Sergeant K. I'm Illy, and this is Hazel, they replied. Nice to meet both of you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. I'm so sorry to inform you that your brother Travis was found deceased this evening. The girls both burst into tears, sobbing and hugging each other. Sergeant K said, I'm sorry for your loss. Later, as Sergeant K sat in his office, he thought, that's the last death notification I give. I need to find this guy, whoever he is. He's going to pay for the grief he's caused. The next morning, all were gathered in the boardroom, Sergeant K, Cuss, Meredith, Jake, and 2 officers. Sorting through all the clues, retracing the events of the previous night step by step, reviewing interactions, cameras, social media posts, and any evidence they could find. While looking through some pictures of his apartment, Jake saw one that made him exclaim, "Oh my gosh, why didn't I think of this before?" A year ago, there was a string of robberies in our apartment complex, and some of the residents put up cameras. My neighbor Phil has a camera that faces the location where Allison disappeared from. Maybe it caught something. 4 hours later, they were all back in the boardroom, watching the footage of Allison getting into a black Volkswagen. Everyone was confused, unsure who the person was, so they turned to Jake, who was now staring at the screen with a ghostly expression. All the blood had drained from his face. He stared at the car on the video, as if he knew something they didn't. Meredith spoke up, "Jake, is there something you need to tell us?" Jake gulped. "I know that car, but there's no way she would do this to Allison. I just don't believe it." Kiss interjected, "Your side piece?" "No. I was loyal to Allison," Jake replied, his voice breaking. "I made some mistakes, but I never cheated or hurt her. I loved her with all my heart." Tears streamed down his face. "But I do know the girl who drives that car would never hurt Allison." "How do you know that?" Sergeant K asked. Because she's Allison's best friend. She would never want to harm Allison." "They were friends," Jake said. "Who is it, Jake?" "Give us a name," Sergeant K demanded. "Hazel," Jake replied. "Hazel Hunt," Sergeant K said, confirming. "Okay, go pick her up, Officer Kent," he ordered. Illy sat nervously in the passenger seat of the car as her sister, Hazel, drove them out of the city. "I wonder where we're going," Illy thought, unsure if the police were aware of what she and her sister had done. But for now, she didn't have time to think about that. Her own safety was in jeopardy. After all, her sister hadn't hesitated to put a bullet in their brother's head. Why would she hesitate to do the same to Illy? At that moment, it felt like it was either her or Hazel. "The next stop we make, I'll make a run for it," Illy thought, making up her mind.
1 hour passed, then 2, and Illy grew increasingly nervous. They never stopped. Eventually, Hazel pulled into a rest stop and said, "I'm going to the restroom. Don't you even think about leaving this car." Hazel stepped out of the car and walked up a path until she disappeared from view. Illy thought, this is it. This is the moment. But how would she get out of here? She began checking her surroundings for any vehicles heading back in the direction she came from when she saw an 18-wheeler driver about to leave. Without a second thought, she unfastened her seatbelt, jumped out of the car, and sprinted toward the driver's side. Illy was pleading and begging the man in the truck to let her in, telling him her life is in danger. He asks what's going on, and she explains that she doesn't have time to explain, but if he lets her in, she will. The man agrees and lets her in on the driver's side. Illy slides to the passenger side floor and stays there until they are far from the rest stop. She then slides into the passenger seat and thanks the man for helping her. He introduces himself as Pastor O'Neill Grady and asks for Illy's name. She introduces herself, saying shyly, "My name is Illy." He replies, "Well, nice to meet you, Miss Illy. I believe you owe me an explanation." Illy explains that she needs to get back to the Blue Ridge Valley police station before her sister finds her and kills her. Grady is shocked and asks, "Kill?" Illy explains what happened. Grady then asks, "Illy, can I pray for you?" Illy agrees, and Grady says a prayer for her. The remainder of the trip is in silence as Illy drifts off to sleep. The truck stops in front of the Blue Ridge Valley police station. Grady looks over at the sleeping Illy, taps her shoulder gently, and tells her, "We're here." She looks out the window, thanks him, and he says, "No problem. Let's get going. We have work to do." Illy says, "You're coming with me?" He replies, "Yes." He gets out of the truck, opens the door for Illy, and they walk into the police station together. Illy approaches the receptionist and says, "I'm Illy Hunt, and I need to speak to Sergeant K." The receptionist tells them to sit and disappears into the back. 10 minutes later, Sergeant K appears. Illy stands, and she and Grady walk toward Sergeant K. Illy says, I'm here to give my statement. Sergeant K replies, okay, follow me. Illy says, since I'm underage and my guardian is dead, can Pastor Grady sit in with me? Sergeant K agrees and leads them to an interrogation room. Everyone sits, and Sergeant K tells Illy, tell me everything. Illy starts with how things changed after their mom died. Her brother, Travis, had to drop out of college to take care of her and Hazel. It was hard on Hazel, who became depressed and distant. It was Hazel's junior year, and she was struggling with her grades. But Illy and Travis supported her. Then one day, Hazel came home smiling, and her grades had improved. Travis teased her, asking, what's his name? Oh, he's got you smiling today. Hazel would blush and say, Jake is just my friend, nothing more. Senior year came and they graduated and went to the same college. There, Hazel met her best friend, Allison, who helped bring Hazel back into the faith. They became close after partnering for an assignment. Life was good for Hazel, she had a cute boyfriend and a cool best friend, until one day, Hazel told Illy that Jake seemed to be pulling away from her. Illy advised her to talk to him. She did, and Jake told her that he had met someone else, that things were serious, and he wanted them to meet. Hazel was angry but played it off and agreed. She immediately developed a hatred for the girl, although she hadn't met her yet. They all met at a restaurant, and to Hazel's surprise, Jake's new girlfriend was Allison. Allison didn't know they were friends or that Hazel had a crush on Jake. They never discussed dating. But after that, Hazel became obsessed with breaking them up, doing subtle things like hiring Travis's girlfriend, Jennifer, to bully them, sending texts to Jake's phone from random numbers, and putting things in Allison's food and drinks to make her sick so she would miss dates with Jake. But it didn't work as Hazel planned, it just made Jake and Allison closer. The thing that really broke the camel's back was when Jake asked Hazel to help him pick out an engagement ring for Allison. Hazel lost it and said she would destroy Allison. The night of the party, Hazel paid Jennifer to pour whiskey on Allison because she knew Allison would be afraid to go home smelling like booze. While they were at the party, Illy was supposed to use Jake's emergency key to get into his house and place panties in noticeable places, then wait outside to pick up Allison and take her to Hazel. After 2 hours, Illy saw Allison storming out. She pulled up and asked if she needed a ride. Allison said yes and quickly climbed in. Illy told her she had to pick up Hazel, and asked if Allison minded. Allison said it didn't bother her one bit. Illy smiled saying, Allison, you're a saint. Then everything went quiet as they continued to drive in silence. They then arrived at a secluded underpass near Highway 10. When they exited the car, Hazel greeted Allison and said she had something to show her. Hazel then told Illy to take Allison over while she got something out of the car. Hazel lingered behind for a minute, then picked up a rock and hit Allison over the head with it. Hazel screamed at her, saying she had stolen her life and Jake from her. Allison groaned and cried in pain, asking God to help her. Hazel struck her with the rock again and again, then threw the rock down, grabbed Allison by the hair, and lifted her head up. She thought Allison was dead, but to her surprise, Allison was still alive. Hazel taunted her, asking if she had any last words. Allison, gurgling blood, said, God forgive you for what you do. Hazel laughed, pulled a rope from her pocket, and strangled Allison. Afterward, Hazel looked at Illy, frozen, and said, now Jake will be all mine. She then called Travis and told him to meet her at the underpass. When he arrived, he and Jennifer were mortified. Hazel ordered them to help move the body to a visible spot on the highway so it would be found. Illy, Travis, and Jennifer were terrified, but Hazel acted as though nothing happened. She spent more time with Jake, using his grief and her position as his and Allison's friend to get close to him. Eventually, Illy, Travis, and Jennifer decided enough was enough. They needed to tell someone what Hazel had done. After careful deliberation, they concluded it was safer for Jennifer to pass the information to Jake because Jennifer had more freedom to move around without Hazel watching her every move. After Jake was arrested, Hazel reached out to Travis to find Jennifer, but he didn't answer. She tracked his phone to Jennifer's apartment, drove there, and pulled a gun from the glove compartment. She ordered Illy out of the car, went to Jennifer's door, covered the peephole, and when Travis opened it, she put the gun to his face and forced him to the bedroom where Jennifer was packing. Hazel made Jennifer face the wall and then shot her and Travis. They left the house, and Hazel drove around for hours doing errands as if it was a normal day and she hadn't just murdered 2 people in cold blood. While getting food, Hazel got a phone call. It was the Blue Ridge Valley Police Station, and they wanted her and Illy to come in to speak with them. Hazel played polite and agreed to come in, then hung up the phone. She turned to Illy smugly and said, "If you can't convince these people you are just a grieving sister, you will pay for it with your life." She then caressed Illy's face and said, "Love you, sis." She cranked the car and drove them to the police station. Sitting in the passenger seat, Illy was mentally taking in the seriousness of the situation. Tears flowed down Illy's face as she finished her story. Illy explained that they arrived at the station and parked. Hazel looked over at her with a sinister smile, giving her another warning before going into the police station. She didn't have to say a word, Illy got the point. They both exited the car and went into the station, where they perfectly played the victim and convinced Sergeant K they were just grieving sisters. Although they succeeded in keeping the police off their radar, Hazel was still paranoid and decided they were leaving town. Hazel was very secretive about their destination, which made Illy all the more fearful because she didn't know where Hazel was taking them. Illy snapped back to the present, looked at Sergeant K, and told him, "I don't know where Hazel is, but I do have the phone number to her burner phone. Will that help?" Sergeant K looked at Illy and said, "It may not be enough, but it's something." He then stood when Illy softly touched his arm, tears flowing down her face, and said, "Sergeant K, my sister is lost and has done some bad things, but she's all I have left. Please bring her in safely, please," Illy begged. Sergeant K looked at Illy and said, "I'll do my best." Then he walked out of the room. Behind him, Sergeant K could hear Illy weeping. His heart broke for this girl, but it didn't change the fact of all the wrong her and her sister had done along the way. Sergeant K and his team set out to find Hazel's whereabouts. When he got a tip from a CI that he had spotted Hazel in Lorridge City at some old janky motel, K followed the lead and found that Hazel indeed was in Lorridge City. He called the Lorridge PD and coordinated with them to capture Hazel Hunt. Sergeant K and his team went to Lorridge City to meet up with Captain Weston so they could set up the sting operation. Clutching the wheel of the car, Hazel looked in the rearview mirror as cops surrounded the car, screaming for her to get out and surrender. But why would she? She was the one in pain. Where was the cavalry when she was broken and everyone had betrayed her? She deserved a happy ending. She deserved a happy ending with Jake. Now it was all over because of Allison. She ruined Hazel's life. Even in death, Allison was a thorn in her side. But one thing Hazel wouldn't do in this life or another was bow down to anyone ever again. Raising the pistol to her head, ready to end it all, Hazel heard someone screaming out, "Hazel!" Sergeant K faced Hazel with calm determination. "Hazel, look at me now. You don't want to do this and leave your sister all alone, do you?" Hazel, her voice filled with anguish, screams, "She betrayed me." "Look, Hazel," Sergeant K says gently. "My name is Sergeant K. We've met before. I know things are out of hand right now, but you need to understand better than anyone that Illy has always loved you and wanted the best for you. She told me how close the 3 of you were." Tears streaming down her face, Hazel's voice shakes as she responds, "She left me. Everyone I loved left me. Mom, Travis, even Illy. How can I trust anyone again?" Sergeant K's voice softens even further. "Hazel, I understand your pain. I truly do. Losing loved ones is heartbreaking, and it's easy to feel abandoned. But Illy never stopped loving you. She's been trying to help you in the best way she knows how. I just wanted love." Hazel's voice breaks as she sobs. "All I did was cause more hurt. Now Allison is gone, my best friend. Mom is gone. Travis and Jennifer. And now I'm going to lose Illy too. Stepping closer, Sergeant K's voice is filled with compassion. Hazel, you haven't lost Illy. She's still here, and she wants to be there for you. You have the chance to turn things around. You still have a future, even with everything that's happened. What do I have to live for? How can I ever be forgiven for this? Hazel's sobs intensify. Sergeant K kneels down to Hazel's level. Hazel, you have everything to live for. God's love is boundless, and His mercy is endless. He offers forgiveness to all who seek it. If you truly want to change, you can find redemption. But it starts with putting down the gun. Hazel trembles as she lowers the gun. I don't know if I can go on. Sergeant K places a hand on Hazel's shoulder. You can, Hazel. You're stronger than you think. God has a plan for you, and it's not over yet. Your sister believes in you. I believe in you. Trust in God's love and take the first step towards healing. Finally placing the gun on the ground, Hazel collapses into tears. I'm so sorry for everything. Sergeant K embraces her. It's okay. You've taken the first step. Now let's walk this path together. Pray with me, Hazel. Nodding through her sobs, Hazel prays, Dear God, please forgive me for the pain I've caused. Help me find the strength to change. Guide me towards a path of healing and redemption. Amen. Sergeant K adds, Amen. You're not alone in this, Hazel. We'll face the future together. 2 weeks later, at Allison's memorial, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the gathering. The somber atmosphere was palpable, yet there was a sense of anticipation as Sergeant K approached the group. Sergeant K, I have some important news to share. He explained how Illy had cooperated fully with the authorities, leading to the capture of Hazel in Lorridge City. Both sisters were now in custody, awaiting their sentencing. There was a mixture of relief and sadness among the attendees. Kes and Meredith clasped their hands together, lifting their eyes heavenward. Praise God, Kes whispered. But not everyone shared their relief. Jake stood apart, his face a mask of anguish. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he cried out, It's my fault Allison is dead. Hazel killed her because of me. Kes walked over to Jake, enveloping him in a firm embrace. It wasn't your fault, Jake. Hazel made her own choices. She's the one who chose to take Allison's life, not you. Meredith and Sergeant K joined the embrace, creating a circle of support around Jake. The warmth of their unity seemed to lift some of the weight from his shoulders. Together, they bowed their heads in prayer. Meredith, Dear Lord, we thank you for the peace and justice you have brought to us. Though our hearts are heavy with loss, we trust in your infinite wisdom and love. Grant us the strength to move forward and the grace to forgive. As they prayed, a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying with it a sense of hope and renewal. In that moment, amidst the sorrow and pain, they found solace in their faith and in each other.